6 months after the Convergence Mine's destruction, Jake Morrison found himself in the most unlikely role of his life, ambassador of unconventional diplomacy for the new Galactic Council. The war was officially over, but peace proved far more complicated than anyone had expected. The Corthony Empire had fractured into dozens of independent factions as individual consciousness spread through their species. Some groups sought peaceful integration with other races, while others became more violent and unpredictable without the restraining influence of the hive mind. Jake's job was to negotiate with beings who were experiencing individual thought for the first time in their evolutionary history. Ambassador Morrison, the former Corthony war commander now called Kix, spoke through a translation device. "My people do not understand these concepts you call emotions and personal choice. We function perfectly when the convergence mind guided our actions. Now we are confused and frightened by the voices in our own heads." Jake sat across from Kix in the negotiation chamber aboard the neutral station that served as the council headquarters. The alien's appearance was still unsettling, insectoid features, compound eyes, and chitinous armor, but there was something different now. Individual personality was beginning to emerge in place of collective programming. "Kix, learning to think for yourself is difficult," Jake replied gently. "Humans struggle with individual consciousness every day. We make mistakes, we feel uncertain, we sometimes choose wrong, but we also create art, form friendships, and discover new possibilities that no collective mind could imagine." Dr. Amy Watson had established the Institute for Consciousness Studies, where she worked with reformed Corthony individuals to understand how different species' mental patterns affected their social development. Her research was revolutionizing xenopsychology and providing crucial insights for the peace negotiations. The transition from collective to individual consciousness is traumatic for any species, Dr. Watson explained during a council briefing. Many Corthony are experiencing what humans would recognize as depression, anxiety, and identity crisis. They need time and support to adapt to their new reality. Admiral Frank Hayes and General Paul Carter were struggling to adapt their military forces to peacetime operations. The Unconventional Warfare Academy had evolved into a broader institution teaching adaptive thinking for civilian applications, but many officers found it difficult to embrace chaos principles outside of combat situations. Commander Rick Barnes had become the leading advocate for integrating chaos theory into economic and social systems. Jake's methods work because they embrace uncertainty as a source of strength rather than a weakness. He explained to a gathering of colonial administrators, "We can apply these same principles to trade negotiations, resource management, and conflict resolution." Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the first truly integrated multi-species fleet, where human unpredictability combined with alien strengths to create unprecedented capabilities for exploration and peacekeeping. Her ships patrolled the frontier regions where Corthony factions still posed threats to civilian populations. Elena Vasquez had developed universal communication protocols that embraced misunderstanding as a source of creative breakthrough rather than an obstacle to overcome. Her translation systems allowed different species to share concepts that had no direct equivalents in other languages, fostering innovation through cultural exchange. The greatest challenge came when a coalition of traditionalist factions from multiple species declared that human chaos doctrine posed a threat to galactic stability. They formed an alliance dedicated to restoring order through military force, viewing individual consciousness as a dangerous disease that needed to be contained. "The humans have infected our galaxy with their madness," declared Supreme Commander Vorth of the Order Alliance during a public broadcast. "Their chaos doctrine destroys the natural hierarchy that maintains peace between species. We will restore proper authority through superior firepower." Jake found himself facing his greatest test as thousands of warships from traditionalist species converged on the Galactic Council station. The coalition included militaristic factions who had always resented human influence, as well as some Corthony groups who wanted to rebuild their hive mind collective. "They outnumber us 10 to 1. Captain Rodriguez reported during the emergency defense planning session. Even with all our unconventional tactics, we cannot win a direct confrontation against that many ships. Jake studied the tactical displays showing the approaching Order Alliance fleet. These were not Corthony with predictable hive mind programming. They were individual commanders from dozens of species, each with their own tactical preferences and cultural biases. Traditional chaos doctrine would not work against such diversity. "We are not going to fight them," Jake announced to the surprised council members. "We are going to offer them something they want more than victory, the chance to prove their philosophy is superior to ours." When the Order Alliance fleet arrived at the council station, they found no defensive preparations, no military formations, no signs of resistance. Instead, Jake transmitted a simple message to Supreme Commander Vorth. "Commander Vorth, you believe that order is superior to chaos, that hierarchy creates stability, and that individual consciousness leads to destruction. I propose we test these beliefs through demonstration rather than warfare. Establish your perfect ordered society on any world you choose, and we will establish our chaotic community on another. After 10 years, let the galaxy judge which approach produces better results for its citizens." The proposal caught the Order Alliance completely off guard. They had prepared for military resistance, not philosophical debate. Supreme Commander Vorth found himself in the unprecedented position of having to defend his beliefs through peaceful demonstration rather than force. "Human Morrison, your offer is a trick," Vorth replied suspiciously. "You seek to delay our righteous mission while you prepare better defenses." "No tricks," Jake responded. "Pure competition between two ways of organizing society. If order truly is superior to chaos, then your world will prosper while ours fails. You will have proven your point without firing a single shot." Dr. Watson realized what Jake was doing, transforming a potential war into a controlled experiment that would provide valuable data about consciousness and social organization. The Order Alliance found themselves trapped by their own rhetoric. If they truly believed in the superiority of order, they should be confident about winning such a competition. After 3 days of tense negotiations, Supreme Commander Vorth agreed to the proposal. The Order Alliance would establish their perfect society on the agricultural world of Harmony Prime, while Jake would lead a mixed-species community on the frontier, Planet of New Beginnings. The final scene of the war took place not on a battlefield but in a simple mining operation on New Beginnings. Jake had returned to the work he understood best, extracting valuable minerals from an alien world while helping former enemies learn to live together. Dr. Watson worked alongside him, their relationship having deepened through years of shared challenges and discoveries. Corthony engineers who had once built war machines now designed innovative mining equipment. Villani traders established new economic networks based on creative resource sharing rather than traditional profit models. "Do you think our experiment will succeed?" Dr. Watson asked as they watched human and alien children playing together in the colony's recreation center. Jake smiled as he watched a young Corthony trying to teach human children a traditional hive mind coordination game while they insisted on adding chaotic rule variations. "It already has," he replied. "Those children will grow up thinking that diversity is normal, that different approaches can work together, and that individual consciousness is something to be celebrated rather than feared." Elena Vasquez called from the communications center with the latest report from Harmony Prime. "Jake, Supreme Commander Vorth's ordered society is experiencing significant problems. Citizens are requesting transfers to colonies that allow more individual freedom. Their perfect hierarchy is collapsing because people want the right to make their own choices." Jake nodded without surprise. He had learned that true victory came not through domination but through transformation. By proving that chaos and order could coexist and strengthen each other, he had changed galactic civilization forever. The war was over, but the real work of building a better future had just begun. Years later, when historians asked how one human had changed the course of galactic history, they would point to the battles at New Dakota, Europa Station, and the Titan Nebula. But Jake knew the real answer was simpler. He had proven that individual consciousness with all its chaos and unpredictability, was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be embraced. The Battle of the Titan Nebula began with the largest fleet assembly in human history. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching as ships from dozens of species took formation around him. Humans, Villani, Zephyrians, and other allied races had combined their forces for this final confrontation with the Korthani Empire, intelligence. Reports indicated that the enemy had deployed their ultimate weapon, the convergence mind. This massive artificial intelligence could process infinite tactical variables and predict even the most chaotic human behavior. It represented everything the Korthani stood for: perfect order, absolute control, and the elimination of individual thought. Jake, we are detecting over 5,000 Korthani ships in the nebula. Captain Lisa Rodriguez reported from her position at the tactical station. The convergence mind is coordinating all of them as a single entity. Dr. Amy Watson monitored the neural disruption weapons that had been installed throughout the Allied fleet. Our quantum resonance generators are ready, but the convergence mind may be too advanced for traditional disruption techniques to work. Jake studied the enemy formation on the main display. The Korthani ships moved with perfect synchronization, like cells in a vast organism. Every vessel knew exactly where it needed to be and what it needed to do. It was the ultimate expression of hive mind efficiency. Elena, are you picking up any communication patterns from their fleet? Jake asked. Elena Vasquez worked at her station, monitoring Korthani transmissions. Nothing recognizable as communication, Jake. They are not talking to each other because they do not need to. The convergence mind is thinking for all of them simultaneously. The first phase of the battle went exactly as Jake had feared. His layered chaos tactics, which had been so successful against adaptive swarms, proved useless against the convergence mind. The artificial intelligence processed every level of randomness, every tactical innovation, every creative solution that human forces could deploy. Within an hour, allied ships were being systematically destroyed. The convergence mind anticipated every unconventional maneuver, countered every creative attack, and predicted every desperate attempt at surprise. Jake watched his carefully planned chaos doctrine crumble against superior computational power. They are not just predicting our moves, Commander Rick Barnes reported grimly. The convergence mind is calculating probability matrices for every possible action we could take. It knows what we are going to do before we do. Jake realized that pure randomness was insufficient against an intelligence capable of calculating all possible chaos patterns. The enemy had evolved beyond simple adaptation. They had achieved perfect prediction. He needed to transcend randomness itself and enter territory that even he did not fully understand. Drawing inspiration from quantum mechanics and human consciousness, Jake developed what he called meta-chaos. Instead of being unpredictable, human forces would become unprocessable by creating actions that violated the logical frameworks needed for prediction. I need every ship in the fleet to do something that makes no sense, Jake announced over the command network. Not random things, but impossible things. Actions that break the rules of physics, tactics, and logic simultaneously. The Villani ships began separating into component parts that operated independently while still functioning as unified vessels. Human fighters started flying in formations that should have caused immediate collisions, but somehow maintained perfect coordination through pilot intuition alone. Zephyrian warships began phase-shifting through dimensions that the convergence mind could not even detect. Dr. Watson monitored the quantum effects generated by the Allied fleet. Jake, our neural resonance patterns are creating interference. Waves that I have never seen before. Human consciousness is generating quantum signatures that seem to exist outside normal spacetime. The convergence mind began showing signs of processing strain as it attempted to analyze phenomena that violated its basic understanding of reality. Allied forces were not just being unpredictable, they were being impossible. Actions had no logical relationship to outcomes, effects preceded causes, and tactical decisions changed their own past circumstances. Captain, Rodriguez led a desperate assault on the Convergence Mine's core station, a massive structure at the center of the Courtney fleet. Her ships performed maneuvers that should have torn them apart, but somehow held together through sheer determination and human stubbornness. The core station is protected by defensive fields that adapt to any form of attack, Rodriguez reported. Our weapons are being analyzed and countered before they can reach the target. Jake stared at the tactical display, watching thousands of lives being lost while he struggled to find a solution. The Convergence Mind was too advanced, too powerful, too perfect in its logical processes. It could counter any attack, predict any strategy, and adapt to any innovation. That was when Jake realized the ultimate unconventional tactic: complete surrender. The one action that no military computer could process as a viable strategy. The most illogical move in the history of warfare. All ships, power down your weapons and engines, Jake ordered over the command network. Drift helplessly and make no aggressive moves. Become completely vulnerable to enemy fire. Jake, that is suicide, Commander Barnes protested. The Convergence Mind will destroy us all within minutes. No, Jake replied with growing certainty. It will try to understand why we surrendered. A perfect intelligence cannot ignore a logical paradox. The Allied fleet powered down in the middle of the battlefield, leaving themselves defenseless against the overwhelming Courtney force. The Convergence Mind's attack slowed as it attempted to process this impossible tactical decision. Why would an enemy surrender while still possessing the capability to fight? What strategic advantage could vulnerability provide? In that moment of confusion, while the Convergence Mind struggled to understand human logic, Vellani stealth ships emerged from quantum hiding spots throughout the nebula. The small vessels had been invisible to all detection systems, waiting. For this precise opportunity, the stealth ships fired simultaneously at the Convergence Mind's core processors, using weapons designed by Jake's Unconventional Warfare Academy. The artificial intelligence, distracted by the paradox of human surrender, could not adapt quickly enough to counter the unexpected assault. The Convergence Mind's destruction created a cascade failure throughout the Courtney fleet. For the first time in their species' history, individual aliens were cut off from the hive mind and forced to think independently. Most could not cope with the isolation and simply shut down their ships. Others discovered the terrifying freedom of individual consciousness and immediately surrendered to Allied forces. Jake watched the aftermath of the battle with mixed emotions. Humanity had won, but at a cost that would haunt him forever. Thousands of ships had been lost, and entire species had been changed in ways that could never be undone. Dr. Watson joined him at the observation window as medical ships moved through the battlefield, rescuing survivors from both sides. You did it, Jake. You changed the course of galactic history through the power of impossible thinking. I destroyed an entire way of life, Jake replied quietly. The Courtney without their hive mind are like humans without individual consciousness. I am not sure victory was worth the price we all paid. 6 months after the victory at Vellani Prime, Jake Morrison faced his greatest challenge yet. The Courtney Empire had responded to human unpredictability by creating specialized hunter-killer units called adaptive swarms. These new enemy forces could learn from human tactics during battle, gradually closing the chaos advantage that had given humanity hope. The first encounter with adaptive swarms occurred at the mining colony of Titan Ridge. Jake watched the battle. Reports with growing concern as his unconventional methods began failing one by one. The Courtney units started each engagement confused by human tactics, but within minutes they were adapting and countering every move. They are learning faster than we can innovate, Commander Rick Barnes reported during the emergency strategy meeting. Our pilots are using the chaos doctrine exactly as you taught them, but the enemy is evolving their responses in real time. Dr. Amy Watson pulled up tactical analysis on the main display. The adaptive swarms are using machine learning algorithms that process human behavior patterns during combat. Each encounter makes them better at predicting our next moves. Jake stared at the data, feeling the weight of every human life lost to his failing methods. Then we need to stop being predictable in our unpredictability. If they can learn from chaos, we need to create something beyond chaos. The solution came from an unexpected source. The Zephyrians, an ancient warrior race that had remained neutral throughout the conflict, finally broke their silence. Their ambassador, a tall being with crystalline features, requested a meeting with Jake personally. "Human Morrison," the Zephyrian ambassador spoke in perfect English, "we have observed your conflict with great interest. Your species fights with the mind rather than just the body, which is why we have decided to share our knowledge." The Zephyrians had been warriors for millions of years, fighting countless species across the galaxy. Their wisdom came from understanding that true victory required constant evolution of both tactics and philosophy. They taught Jake the concept of layered chaos, multiple levels of randomness that confused even adaptive systems. "Your enemy learns from single patterns of disorder," the Zephyrian explained. "But if you create chaos within chaos, even learning systems cannot keep up with the changes." Jake worked with both human and alien scientists to develop new technologies based on layered chaos principles. They created weapons that randomized not just their targeting, but also their methods of randomization. Ships were designed to change their basic operating principles mid-battle, making adaptation impossible. Commander Barnes, who had initially been Jake's biggest skeptic, became his strongest advocate after witnessing the effectiveness of the new approach. Together they established the Unconventional Warfare Academy, training a new generation of soldiers to think beyond traditional military parameters. "We are not teaching tactics," Jake explained to the first class of cadets. "We are teaching you to abandon the idea of tactics altogether. Every situation requires a completely new approach that has never been tried before." Elena Vasquez developed communication protocols that allowed chaotic forces to coordinate without losing their unpredictable nature. Her systems used quantum encryption that changed its own rules constantly, making interception and prediction impossible even for advanced alien computers. The war escalated into something larger than anyone had expected. Other alien races began choosing sides based on their own cultural values. Species that valued order and hierarchy supported the Corthony, while those that prized creativity and individual freedom allied with humanity. Jake discovered that his mining background had provided unique insights because resource extraction required constant adaptation to changing conditions. He began recruiting from non-military professions, seeking out artists, entrepreneurs, explorers, and innovators who thought differently about problem solving. "Musicians understand improvisation," Jake explained to Dr. Watson as they reviewed recruitment profiles. "Artists see possibilities where others see limitations. Engineers find ways to make impossible things work. These are the people we need fighting this war." Dr. Watson's research had revealed something remarkable about human neural patterns. The quantum resonances created by human consciousness actually interfered with Corthony hive mind communications. This discovery led to the development of neural disruption weapons that could temporarily sever alien units from their collective intelligence. "Individual Corthony cannot function without the hive mind," Dr. Watson explained during a weapons briefing. "They become paralyzed when cut off from the collective consciousness that guides their every action." The largest test of the new layered chaos doctrine came at the Battle of the Nexus Gate, a critical hyperspace junction that controlled access to 3 major star systems. The Corthony deployed their most advanced adaptive swarms, confident that their learning algorithms could counter any human strategy. Jake coordinated the defense from multiple command centers simultaneously, using layered chaos principles to create a battle plan that changed its own objectives in real time. Human forces would begin attacking one target, then shift to completely different tactics mid-engagement, then abandon both approaches for something entirely new. The adaptive swarms tried to learn from each phase of the battle, but by the time they adapted to one layer of chaos, human forces had already moved to a different layer. Corthony computers began overloading as they attempted to process multiple conflicting patterns of behavior. Simultaneously, Captain Lisa Rodriguez led the assault on the main Corthony command ship, using a fighter squadron that changed its formation pattern every few seconds. Elena Vasquez coordinated communications using protocols that reinvented themselves continuously, making enemy interception useless. The victory at Nexus Gate proved that layered chaos could overcome even adaptive systems, but it came at a terrible cost. Jake watched the casualty reports and felt the weight of every decision he had made. Thousands of brave humans and aliens had died to prove his theories correct. Dr. Watson found Jake in his quarters after the battle, staring at photographs of all the people who had died implementing his ideas. "You are carrying a burden that no one person should bear," she said gently. "Every time we win, they adapt and get stronger," Jake replied wearily. "How many more people will die before this war ends? How many more battles will we have to fight to prove that chaos can defeat order?" "As many as it takes," Dr. Watson answered. "Because the alternative is surrendering to a hive mind that would eliminate individual consciousness throughout the galaxy. You are not just fighting for humanity, Jake. You are fighting for the right of every thinking being to be unique." Jake looked out at the stars where the war continued to rage, knowing that his greatest challenge still lay ahead. The Corthony were preparing their ultimate weapon, and he would need to transcend everything he had learned about chaos to face what was coming. News of the Europa Station victory spread across human space like wildfire. Colonial militias began attempting their own versions of unconventional warfare, but most efforts ended in disaster. Without Jake's instinctive understanding of chaos theory, well-meaning colonists simply got themselves killed trying to copy tactics they did not truly understand. Captain Lisa Rodriguez led a series of training missions to frontier worlds, but the lessons proved difficult to teach through standard military instruction. "You cannot just tell someone to be unpredictable," she explained to Admiral Hayes during a secure communication. "Jake's methods require a completely different way of thinking about problems." Jake himself was struggling with the responsibility of his growing reputation. Every failed colonial attempt to use his tactics felt like a personal failure. He spent sleepless nights in his quarters aboard the UES Defiant, trying to figure out how to share his approach without getting more people killed. Dr. Amy Watson found him in the ship's observation deck one evening, staring out at the stars. "You are blaming yourself for things beyond your control," she said softly, sitting down beside him. "People are dying because they think they can fight like me," Jake replied. "But I never learned to fight. I just learned to solve problems with whatever tools were available. There is a difference." "Then maybe that is what we need to teach them," Dr. Watson suggested. "Not military tactics, but creative problem solving. Not how to copy your methods, but how to develop their own." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the Villani Coalition. The peaceful trading alliance that had been humanity's first alien contact was under attack by Corthony forces. Their ambassador requested human assistance, specifically asking for Jake Morrison by name. Admiral Hayes assembled a joint task force to aid the Villani, with Jake serving as tactical advisor. The journey to Villani space took 2 weeks, during which Jake studied everything available about their culture and technology. What he discovered surprised him. "The Villani are natural traders," Jake explained to the mission briefing. "They think in terms of improvisation and resource optimization. Their entire society is built around adapting to changing market conditions and finding creative solutions to logistical problems." Commander Barnes looked intrigued. "Are you saying they might be better suited for unconventional warfare than our own military personnel?" "I'm saying they already think the way we need to think," Jake replied. "They just need to apply those skills to combat situations." When the human fleet arrived at Villani Prime, they found a world under siege. Corthony ships had established a blockade around the planet, systematically destroying any vessel that tried to break through. The Villani defense fleet was composed mainly of converted merchant ships that stood no chance against military-grade alien technology. Jake requested a meeting with Villani engineers and ship captains. The aliens were tall, slender beings with large eyes and 4 arms that allowed them to operate complex control systems. Their leader, Captain Zara, greeted Jake with obvious desperation. "Human Morrison, our situation is hopeless," Captain Zara said through the translation device. "Korthani ships destroy anything we send against them. Our weapons cannot penetrate their armor, and our ships are too slow to escape their targeting systems." Jake studied the Villani ship designs and found himself impressed by their modular construction. "Your vessels are built to be reconfigured for different cargo types, right? What if we reconfigured them for combat in ways the Korthani have never seen?" Working with Villani engineers, Jake developed hybrid technologies that combined human unpredictability with alien innovation. They created weapons that randomized their own targeting patterns, making it impossible for Korthani computers to predict where shots would land. Ship modules were designed to separate and recombine during battle, confusing enemy tracking systems. The breakthrough came when Jake realized that Villani trading practices were essentially economic warfare. "You already know how to outmaneuver opponents," he told Captain Zara. "You negotiate with hostile species, navigate dangerous trade routes, and find profit in situations where others see only loss. Combat is just another form of negotiation, Doctor." Watson documented everything, creating psychological profiles of humans and aliens best suited for unconventional warfare. She identified traits like creativity, adaptability, and rule-breaking tendencies as valuable military assets. Completely reversing traditional recruitment criteria, the Battle of Villani Prime began at dawn on a Tuesday. Jake coordinated the defense from the UES Defiant while Captain Rodriguez led the human squadron. The Korthani attacked in their usual formation, expecting to overwhelm the defenders through superior firepower and tactical coordination. Instead, they faced complete chaos. Villani ships separated into dozens of smaller modules that swarmed around Korthani vessels like angry insects. Human fighters used randomized attack patterns that made targeting impossible. Hybrid weapons created by Villani engineers fired shots that changed direction mid-flight, striking targets from unexpected angles. The Korthani tactical computers could not process what they were seeing. Their algorithms were designed to predict logical military behavior, not the economic improvisation of trader species combined with human creative chaos. Within hours, the alien fleet was retreating in confusion. Elena Vasquez intercepted Korthani. Communications during the battle and the translations were disturbing. The aliens were developing new adaptive protocols specifically designed to counter human unpredictability. Their next-generation tactical systems would be able to learn and evolve during combat. "They are not just studying our methods," Elena reported to Jake after the battle. "They are creating new types of warrior drones that can adapt in real time. Your chaos advantage may not work much longer." Jake nodded grimly as he watched Korthani. Ships disappear into hyperspace. The enemy was evolving, and he would need to evolve even faster. The war had become an arms race between human creativity and alien adaptation, and Jake was no longer certain which side would win. Captain Zara approached Jake as he prepared to return to human space. "Human Morrison, you have given my people hope and taught us to fight with our minds instead of just our weapons. But I fear this victory is only the beginning of a much larger conflict." Jake looked out at the stars where Korthani ships had vanished, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, alien scientists were working to counter everything he had accomplished. The next phase of the war would require him to transcend mere unpredictability and discover new forms of chaos that even adaptive systems could not comprehend. 3 weeks later, Jake Morrison found himself standing in a military courtroom on Earth, feeling completely out of place in his borrowed uniform. The room was filled with high-ranking officers who looked at him like he was some kind of dangerous animal. General Paul Carter sat at the center of the panel, his face showing clear disapproval of everything Jake represented. "Mr. Morrison," General Carter began in a cold voice, "your actions on New Dakota were reckless and could have resulted in massive civilian casualties. Military doctrine exists for good reasons, and individuals who ignore proper procedures put everyone at risk." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Sir, with respect, following proper procedures would have gotten everyone killed." The Korthani were already overwhelming our security forces using standard tactics. Dr. Amy Watson stood up from her seat in the observation area. She had spent the last 3 weeks studying recordings of the New Dakota incident, and her findings were remarkable. "General Carter, if I may present my research," she said, holding up a data pad filled with tactical analysis. "The Korthani hive mind operates on predictive algorithms," Dr. Watson explained to the panel. "They analyze human behavior patterns and calculate the most likely responses to any given situation. This allows them to counter our moves before we even make them." However, Mr. Morrison's actions fell completely outside their prediction models. Commander Rick Barnes, who had been silent until now, leaned forward with interest. "Are you suggesting that random behavior could be weaponized against the Korthani?" "Not random behavior," Dr. Watson corrected. "Creative problem solving that ignores conventional military thinking. The Korthani cannot predict actions that have no logical basis in standard tactical doctrine." Admiral Frank Hayes had been listening to the discussion with growing excitement. The human fleet had suffered devastating losses in recent months, and conventional strategies were clearly failing. "Dr. Watson, are you saying that Mr. Morrison's approach could be taught to our military forces?" Jake spoke up before Dr. Watson could answer. "You cannot teach someone to think like me by putting them through military training. The whole point is to not think like a soldier. You need people who solve problems differently, who see opportunities where others see obstacles." General Carter looked skeptical. "Mr. Morrison, warfare requires discipline and coordination. Individual creativity leads to chaos and friendly fire incidents." "Maybe chaos is exactly what we need," Jake replied. "The Korthani win because they can predict order. They cannot predict chaos." Admiral Hayes made a decision that would change the course of the war. "I am authorizing an experimental program. Mr. Morrison will work with Commander Barnes to develop new tactical approaches. Dr. Watson will provide scientific support and analysis." The first test of Jake's methods came 2 months later at Europa Station. The orbital facility was a critical supply depot that the Korthani had targeted for destruction. Intelligence reports indicated a massive enemy fleet was approaching, and conventional defenses would not be enough to stop them. Commander Barnes had spent weeks trying to understand Jake's thinking process, but he still struggled with the concept of abandoning established military doctrine. "Jake, we have 17 cargo haulers available as support vessels. Standard procedure would be to use them for evacuation and supply runs." Jake studied the tactical display showing the approaching Korthani fleet. "What if we loaded those cargo haulers with construction equipment and used them as weapons platforms? Mining mechs, welding torches, industrial cutters. The Korthani have never faced anything like that in space combat." "That plan is completely insane," Commander Barnes said. "Those vessels have no armor, no military-grade weapons, no trained crews. They will be destroyed in minutes." "Exactly," Jake replied with a grin. "The Korthani will not see them as threats until it is too late. Their targeting systems will focus on our military ships while civilian vessels get close enough to cause real damage." Captain Lisa Rodriguez volunteered to lead the unconventional fleet. She had witnessed Jake's victory on New Dakota and understood that desperate times required desperate measures. Elena Vasquez worked with civilian crews to modify their cargo haulers, turning peaceful transport ships into improvised weapons of war. When the Korthani fleet arrived at Europa Station, they found exactly what their tactical computers expected to find: human military vessels in defensive formation, prepared for conventional space combat. The alien ships moved to engage according to standard battle protocols. What the Korthani did not expect was 17 cargo haulers filled with construction mechs suddenly accelerating toward their fleet. The civilian ships had no weapon signatures, no military transponders, no tactical importance according to Korthani algorithms. By the time the aliens realized the threat, welding torches were cutting through their hull plating and mining equipment, was tearing apart their weapon systems. The battle was brutal and costly. Half of the improvised fleet was destroyed, and many brave civilians died in the fighting. But for the first time in the war, human forces achieved a favorable kill ratio against Korthani ships. The enemy fleet retreated, leaving Europa Station intact. In the aftermath of the victory, Jake sat in the station's medical bay, watching doctors treat wounded civilians who had volunteered for his crazy plan. Dr. Watson found him there, looking exhausted and guilt-ridden. "You are having second thoughts about your methods," she observed gently. Jake nodded slowly. "These people died because I convinced them to do something that made no sense. How many more will die because of my ideas? How many more will live because of them?" Dr. Watson countered. "Jake, you have given humanity its first real hope in this war. The Korthani are already adapting their tactics based on what happened here. Your window of advantage may be closing, but you have proven that they can be beaten." Commander Barnes joined them in the medical bay, his expression a mixture of respect and concern. "Jake, I am beginning to understand your approach, but I am worried about what happens when the Korthani learn to counter it. They are already modifying their tactical algorithms to account for unconventional human behavior." Jake looked out at the stars through the medical bay's viewport. Somewhere out there, the Korthani Empire was analyzing the Europa Station battle, trying to understand how humans had achieved the impossible. The war was far from over, and Jake knew that his next challenge would be even greater than the first. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he watched the morning sun rise over New Dakota Colony. The mining operation was running smoothly today, and the ore extractors hummed with their usual steady rhythm. He had been working these mines for 5 years now, ever since he left Earth looking for a fresh start. The pay was good, and the work kept his hands busy, which helped him forget about the war that raged across human space. The Korthani Empire had been attacking human colonies for 3 years now. Their insect-like ships would appear without warning, destroy everything in sight, and disappear before help could arrive. Jake had seen the news reports of massive fleet battles where human forces were crushed again and again. The aliens seemed to know exactly what humans would do before they did it. Their hive mind could predict every military move, every tactical decision, every desperate attempt at defense. Jake was checking the drilling equipment when Elena Vasquez came running from the communications center. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Jake, we have a problem," she said breathlessly. "Long-range sensors are picking up Korthani ships heading this way. The military says they cannot get here in time to help us." The colony alarm started blaring across the settlement. People were running everywhere, grabbing what they could carry and heading for the emergency shelters. Jake looked at the panic around him and felt something strange. Instead of fear, he felt angry. These aliens thought they could just show up and destroy everything he had worked to build. The first Korthani dropships landed near the main mining facility just as Jake was helping load civilians into transport vehicles. The alien ships were dark and angular, looking like giant metal insects. They opened up and warrior drones poured out, their weapons already firing at anything that moved. The few colony security guards tried to fight back, but their small arms could barely scratch the alien armor. Jake watched as the security team was quickly overwhelmed. The Korthani moved with perfect coordination, like they were all controlled by the same mind. They advanced in formation toward the residential area where families were still trying to evacuate. Jake knew that in minutes everyone he cared about would be dead. That was when Jake stopped thinking like everyone else. Instead of running or hiding, he climbed into the cab of the largest ore extractor. The machine was designed to tear through solid rock, and Jake figured it might work just as well on alien metal. He fired up the massive drill arm and drove straight toward the nearest Korthani squad. The aliens stopped shooting and stared at the approaching mining vehicle. Their tactical computers had no data on construction equipment being used as weapons. Jake slammed the drill into the first warrior drone, tearing through its armor like paper. The machine's grabber arms picked up a second alien and threw it into the third one. The Korthani tried to adapt, but Jake was not following any military pattern they could recognize. He used the ore extractor's magnetic lifters to hurl chunks of metal at the dropships. He activated the sonic blasters meant for breaking up rock formations and watched alien warriors stumble around in confusion. When they tried to surround him, Jake dumped a load of explosive mining charges and drove away before they detonated. More Corthony reinforcements landed, but Jake was already moving to his next target. He grabbed a plasma cutter from the repair shop and modified it into a weapon that could slice through alien hull plating. He rigged cargo haulers to ram into enemy positions while he controlled them remotely. Every attack was different. Every move was something the aliens had never seen before. Dr. Amy Watson was monitoring the situation from the rescue ship that Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded. They had arrived expecting to find another destroyed colony, but instead they saw something impossible. The sensors showed human life signs still active and Corthony forces in full retreat. One human was single-handedly driving off an entire invasion force. How is this possible? Dr. Watson asked as she watched the tactical display. No human has ever defeated Corthony ground forces in direct combat. Captain Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. I have been fighting this war for 2 years, and I have never seen anything like this. We need to get down there and find out who is responsible for this miracle. When the rescue team landed, they found Jake sitting on a pile of destroyed alien equipment, still holding a modified plasma torch. The mining facility was damaged but intact, and most of the colonists had survived. 3 Corthony war machines lay scattered around the area, their advanced technology reduced to smoking scrap metal. Jake looked up at the military officers with tired eyes. Are you here to help with the cleanup? He asked simply. Because I have got a lot of work to do before the next shift starts. Captain Rodriguez stared at this ordinary man who had just accomplished what entire armies could not. Dr. Watson was already taking readings with her instruments, trying to understand what had happened here. Admiral Frank Hayes would want a full report on this incident because for the first time since the war began, humans had won a battle against the Corthony Empire.